The lightweight high power. Let's check it out. The Browning High Power, it was John Moses Browning's final design. He died before its completion, but it was introduced in 1935. This served on both sides of World War II. It's also was adopted by NATO. It was adopted by a lot of different countries for military and police use. It had a 13+1 mag capacity, which was huge over anything else that was on the market. It's very pointable, it's very thin. I mean, the Browning High Power, it's a very iconic handgun. Today we're going to take a look at the lightweight high power. There were only a few thousand of these made, mainly for European police forces. And so these were never commercially available. There are small lots that have come into the country over the years, and this one I just happened to find on AIM Surplus. But the Browning High Power was officially discontinued in 2018. And now FN has reintroduced their new version. But there's something about those original old high powers are just legendary. The lightweight Browning High Power, this is from FN. It was not commercially available to the public. This was honestly regulated mainly toward law enforcement in Europe. And there were only a few thousand of these made. So when these come in, they're just very limited supply. Guys, of course, with the high power being discontinued back in 2018, it's made these very desirable. Yes, FN has reintroduced their high power, but it's different. And while it's a beautifully shooting gun, there's just something about these original high powers that's just very appealing. But first, before we get started, let's go ahead and make sure the gun is unloaded. We're going to drop our 13-round magazine, check the chamber, and it's empty. It does have a magazine disconnect, so when you remove the magazine, there's no action, it just locks it out. And until you put that magazine back in, it'll function. This can be disabled, but this one is going to be left as it is. Now, one of the things about these magazines is, of course, this is an original magazine for this pistol. But the new magazines, if you'll notice, there's a little spring here at the back, and honestly, I've never seen that. And it actually activates to push this magazine out. So as we push it in, you'll see right here that spring just rests up against the bottom of the frame. And then it gives it just a little bit of oomph to pull it out. With most of your standard magazines, and here I have an old surplus magazine, they don't have that. So I thought that was kind of unique. Metgar makes 15-round magazines for the high power, and of course there are others available. Metgar makes mags for a lot of different companies. So I just highly recommend the Metgar mags. But as far as this, it has that matte finish to it. And again, these were really designed for police units. But even though there's that spring on the magazine, this takes your standard magazines without any problem. It just doesn't pop out, so you have to just kind of pull them out. But when we were shooting at the range, we were interchanging magazines, all different types. We didn't have any issues other than we just had to pull that out. It has different type grips, though, a lot of times you'll find, and these are original, just high power grips that are that polycarbonate. But this one actually came with a wraparound hoe grip, and I took it off because this just looks more authentic. But one of the big things about the Browning High Power was it did have a double stack 13-round mag, which was huge. Most of your 9mm pistols had a 8-round mag or 7-round mag. And it wasn't until 1971 that Smith & Wesson introduced their Model 59. The first was the 39, which was a single stack mag. This is a double single action, and it has a 14 round mag capacity originally. Then we're going to check the chamber. It's empty. And it also has the magazine disconnect. That's one thing I despise. But, you know, a lot of police and military units wanted that. This is really a long time coming, considering this came out in 1935 and this was not until 1971. Now, the all-steel frame high powers obviously were very plentiful. There was over 1.5 million high powers made. They served a number of different countries. Now, this is a commercial model. It is what they call the practical. It has a baked-on finish, which most of the high powers did have, that epoxy baked-on finish, and then it has a finish on the steel frame. This is all steel. I do have a couple of police trade-ins that are all steel as well. Pretty much the similar condition to this. But these are great shooters. They're very thin, and that's one of the things, very pointable. But it has a little bit of a wider grip. To me, very close to the 1911 as far as the pointability. But one of the huge advantages of the lightweight or the alloy frame is that it comes in at about 10 ounces less than your steel frame. It's funny, the high power kind of belies its weight. There's something about how naturally it feels, but you know, it's 35 ounces, where you bring in the aluminum high power and it comes in at about 26 ounces. Much easier to carry, and that was one of the things that really led to the lightweight high power. Now, this wasn't the first one. In fact, John Inglis out of Canada designed a lightweight high power. It was tested by the US, Canada, and Britain. It had cuts in the slide, and then they just had a lot of issues though with those frames. And one of the big ones was right here at this little pin, the barrel pin, and it would actually start to deform the aluminum. Now, they came out with this, again, many years later. These were introduced in about the early 70s up and through the 80s. And somehow they fixed that, because this one has been a great little shooter. Now, one of the things about these guns is that with the aluminum frame, even though, and we'll look at it when we break it down, there is some reinforcement to be able to protect the aluminum from the steel slide coming back. But these are honestly limited in use. The life on these is going to be definitely less just because it has that aluminum frame. Now, it has again the standard just checkered grips. We have a smooth front and back strap, and then we have this really small beaver tail. Now, one of the things about a high power period is that you get hammer bite if you have just large hands. I mean, this hammer will come back and it will bite right into your hand. Some of the newer high powers have more of the commander or the hoop style, and this definitely helps. It doesn't come back quite as far. But even then, you can get bit by this hammer as well. So that's one thing to be careful of. And of course, the beaver tail area is very small. But for me, medium-sized hands, I don't have any issues with them. But that is one thing to consider. If you want something, this little tanged hammer is going to get a hold of the back of your hand. Not necessarily slide bite, even though the bore axis is pretty low on these. Now, you have your just standard sights. These are just combat sights. They did make models, obviously, that were commercially available that had adjustable or different type sights, just like we have on this practical. When it has this very narrow front, it's what they call the high power cut. It makes it a little bit easier to do press checks, and it just makes it easier to insert into holsters. And one of the things that really differentiates it from other handguns. Slide serrations are, you know, they're fine. You can pick them up, but there's not a lot of real estate there. And then obviously there's no front slide serrations, but honestly that little high power cut really makes a difference. Your safety's here at the back, and it's just a little nub safety. It's not all that easy to push up. It's because it's so small. And then we have our slide stop right here that is elongated. Mag release right here, it is of course steel, and it just pops those magazines out, but again, it has a lot to do with that little spring. Here at the back we had an area for a lanyard. It's a little hole and the lanyard ring came off of it. The grip has just a slight bevel right here, and it just seems to fill your hand very nicely. Shooting these, again, it's just a pleasure. I just love high powers. I have for a number of years, and a lot of it has to do with the history behind it, but a lot of it has to do with just the design. Now, these came in 9mm and 40 caliber. And with the lightweight high power, the slide's pretty much the same. I mean, you can change this out with even one of the detective models, which is a little bit shorter. So the features of this handgun are pretty close. There's a major difference in the frame, and the barrels are a little bit different, but again, we'll check that out in just a minute. The barrel's been hard chromed. It's 4.58 inches in length, which is standard for all your different high powers, and you have your extractor right here on the side. One thing about these lightweight high powers is a lot of times the aluminum can come through in different places, little high spots. Most of this looks like holster wear. I don't really think that this gun has been shot a whole lot. Now, one of the things also about the lightweight high powers is that the machining sometimes is not the best. And here you can see the tool marks very vaguely under this baked on epoxy. And some of the interior, you can see some machining marks, just not quite finished off. But again, these were made for police and military units. For commercial guns, they took a lot more care. And in the U.S., the Browning high power was used by the FBI hostage rescue teams, or HRT, up until 1999. And in Vietnam, with the Special Operations Group, these were used. A lot of that had to do with the round capacity. Now, over the years, there's been a number of different clones made of the Browning high power. IMI, or Israeli Military Industries, they use the Browning high power. Of course, FN and Browning. Under the Browning license, FN did produce high powers. And then FEG out of Hungary, they have a really nice high power. FM out of Argentina. Those are some really nice high powers as well. I've seen a lot of Argentine guns that have been made by their military that are just excellent. TSUS. Then Springfield Armory introduced their SA-35. High power clone. I mean, it's very good quality, and really initially they had a couple of problems, mainly with the extractor once they fixed it. But, these are slower to produce. I mean, there's a lot of machining that goes into these, and the price reflects it. But now one recently that I just reviewed is the Gerson, and this is their lightweight high power. Now, this is their high power with the aluminum frame, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it out. But it does have that detective length slide to it. They've extended the beaver tail to get rid of that slide bite. They've added the extended ambidextrous safeties. This is a great shooting little gun. In fact, when I first got it, I thought that it might be a little snappy, being aluminum and that short barrel. It was a pleasure to shoot. Gerson really has a whole line of different high power models that honestly are really good quality. So while we have lost the Browning high power, or the FN high power, we've gained a lot of others, a lot that were made for years. The number of countries that have used the Browning high power is staggering. Now, one beautiful thing about your high power, even if you get a police trade-in that is really rough, has been used a lot. There's a number of different companies out there that specialize in high powers. And BH Spring Solutions is one of them. They'll do refinishing, they do a lot of springs, they have new barrel designs. They actually improve the overall design of the high power. And so it's really great that if you buy a police trade-in, you will have parts and you can have things done to it to your heart's desire. Let's check the trigger pull action. We have some take up right about to here. We hit a definite wall. Nice break. Very little resistance. Reset. Reset comes out a good bit. And honestly, it's not that tactile or audible, but comes right on it. We're going to check the trigger pull weight with our Lyman trigger gauge. 5 pounds, 8.8 ounces. 5 pounds, 14.6 ounces. Weight on the lightweight high power, 25.36 ounces. Weight on the full steel Browning high power, 32.45 ounces. Considerable difference. I want to give a big thank you to Fiocchi for sponsoring our ammo. All made right here in the USA. One of the biggest suppliers of ammunition in the country. Also, we appreciate our Lula loaders. We appreciate Mag Lula for sending these to make mag loading easy. Guys, it's just an iconic piece, and it served with the British forces all through World War II and way beyond. Still serves in a number of different nations. It's just one of those ergonomic, great shooting guns. It is a 13-round mag capacity traditionally, and of course you can get the 15-rounders now, which brings it up to, pretty much modern standards. A lot of things have been done to these, but this aluminum frame is definitely different. There weren't a whole lot of these made, so I was really glad to be able to get one. But, we're going to go ahead and test it and shoot a few rounds, and then we're going to shoot one with the steel frame just to see the difference. It's not bad. I mean, the recoil is just not that bad. Bringing out the steel model, of course, this is one of the practicals. It's a actual Browning, and had this one for a good while. And I'll tell you guys, I've always had Browning high powers. I really hated to see them go, but they just shoot really well. It's funny, you get a little more muzzle flip with the steel frame. Maybe because the slide coming back, I'm not really sure, but the aluminum frame seems to just be a little more recoil in your hand, but it actually seems to shoot flatter, which I think is pretty interesting. Now, one of the things with these is with this small tang at the back, a lot of people get hammer bite. Not so much slide bite, but it is possible. But the tang hammer definitely, it leads to that. So a lot of people just don't really care about shooting these. Even with the commander style hammer, you can get bit. I've got medium-sized hands, and that hammer just comes just a little bit over my hand. Never had any issues with it. But honestly, guys, I'll tell you, this aluminum frame honestly shoots just as well as the steel frame. It just shoots differently. So if you ever find one of these, you want to shoot them, it makes a great candidate. And even though it has 13 rounds with a lot of the standard magazines, the 15 rounders are very available. And Metgar makes magazines for the Browning high power. Hey guys, they've gotten very expensive, but you can own one. I highly recommend it. All right, for disassembly, we're going to drop our magazine, check the chamber again. Bring back your slide, and you'll notice there's a second notch that's exactly like your frame safety notch. So we bring it all the way back, just engage it into that position. Now on your takedown lever, you push from this side, but you actually lift up your slide stop a little bit. This one seems to be a little tougher than others. I'm just going to take my magazine, hit that button when I'm pushing up. There it goes. On most high powers, it's really simple to do that. And then just release back here at your safety and then pull the slide right off the frame. Here we have our recoil spring and guide rod. Notice how it kind of fits into the barrel. A little bit different. This is a linkless design compared to the link design of your 1911. And here we have just a straight angle. This is a failure point on some high powers. This takes the impact, and so it can fracture right here, and there are solutions for that. Then we have our cam action right here. Now here we have a Browning high power barrel at the bottom. And you can see that it does have a little more of a flat surface right here. It's more rounded off on the lightweight model. Now on the slide rails, being aluminum, you can see the wear right here. Right in there is that beefed up steel little insert, and it just rides right there in your barrel. And so as it works, it just kind of lifts up like this, especially working off of your slide stop. But this is what the impact is on the frame to the slide. And so this is the area that actually helps protect your frame from cracking, and it gives it just extra life. It's not a whole lot, but it definitely gives you something, and obviously they've kept it from expanding right in here in that pin. But otherwise, it is a standard Browning high power design. And you'll notice on the commercial high power, this is squared off, it's not rounded off. And so it impacts a little bit differently. But from what I understand, even modern barrels will work in the lightweight high power. And slide, same thing, Browning high power. It does have some tooling marks in here. And again, this was really a utilitarian gun. That's all you need to do. To field strip for reassembly, we're going to just drop in our barrel, bring in our recoil spring and guide rod, and again we're going to line it up where it fits down into the barrel. Bring over your slide and engage that one point, the second point again, and then just drop in your slide stop. There it goes. And we're good to go. Re-enter our magazine, test for function, and we're ready to go. Now, as far as price, Browning high powers have really risen in price over the past few years, mainly after they were discontinued. But they were already a pretty pricey handgun. I mean, they retailed on the Browning website for around $1,000. $800 is about the right price. For the surplus market, you used to could see those a lot cheaper, but once Browning discontinued it, those prices have even risen. Now, this is, of course, the aluminum frame, so it is kind of an unusual, more of a collector. But it was $7.99 on AIM Surplus. They did have the all-steel frames as well, and they were $7.99. That's just pretty much what you're going to see across the board, and we really appreciate our Patreon members for allowing us to make this purchase because it gave us the funds to do it, and we love our Patreon family. But now some pros and cons. I mean, it has the legendary high power shootability. You know, you can get the parts for it. There's a lot that you can do with this handgun and get up to 15+1 in the magazine. I love shooting the Browning high power. That is a huge positive just in itself. Negatives would be with the aluminum frame. If you're going to really shoot this a lot, I would go with the steel frame. If you're going to just shoot it on a fairly regular basis and even carry this for concealed carry, this would do fine. I mean, it can take a number of rounds. It's just that if you're going to really shoot it a lot, the steel frame is going to be a better choice. If you have really big hands, you really want to think about it because that hammer will tear you up. And so big meaty hands can have some issues with these. But there are companies out there, or you can do it yourself, as you can bob this hammer if you want to and just make it a very short hammer. And there are companies that actually will extend the tangs and do all kind of stuff if the high power is your choice. Magazine disconnect is a con, but that's across the board with your high powers. But I have a number that I have disconnected the magazine safety, so, and it's not a big deal. Extra magazines are easy to come by. In fact, Metgar makes the 15-rounder, which gives you a couple of extra rounds. But you can still find the old surplus mags all over. They were used again for so long. There's just a lot of surplus mags out on the market. Sights, you know, are not all that great. They're combat sights, and unless you have some real serious gunsmithing work, that's what you're going to have. So that's kind of a negative as well. But this is just a piece of history, and I think that's what the big appeal for this handgun is. While the Browning high power is legendary, been around again since 1935 and still being used around the world. There's something about the pointability, just the ease of shooting, the 13 to 15 round magazine capacity, and it just has a lot of soul to it. When you get that lightweight high power, it just really makes it easy to carry. And while your steel frame versions are going to last longer, the aluminum frame really makes this nice on your hip or just in a collection. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. The Browning high power was discontinued in the Browning high power, when was it, 18? And it wasn't until 1959. Okay, was it 59? Her son, okay, no, I won't do that yet. No. Kim is the Springfield, okay. If that is, okay. Okay, let's start this over.
Okay. Okay. Let's see what we got. We got some sound. Got sound.
Of course, Browning went to the new high power. Okay.